just want to give people the option, right? To review these best practices that we'll be able to talk about. And one thing, and this is kind of been my opening comments on these is, as we've done this 5 times now, we kind of changed things up this year of the state providing, I would call them guidance at the local level rather than the Grand Planning regional level. And so at the end of this call, throughout, after any time, just let us know your feedback on that process, because I know while it might be perhaps less burdensome at the local level, we, the states, don't have as much insight as you all do in terms of what's going on on a day-to-day level. That means like contracts coming in and out, staff leaving, grants, all kinds of things. And so just let us know how best to work that in. So what is our mission? Our mission is the same, becoming the best public workforce system in the nation. And from these, I'm just trying to get it. So also feel free to just jump in and chat and raise your hand, whatever you want to do. I'm open to just trying to pull that up so I could see those if anything pops in. So WIOA has given us kind of 5 core things that we're trying to address. The first is increasing access to education, training, and employment, particularly for those with significant barriers to employment, right? Second is we want to align our system to make sure that we're all kind of rowing in the same direction. Third is we want to improve the quality and labor market relevance of our efforts. And so I think now that KPIs are squarely placed in Wired, we are even more capable of aligning with that core pillar. So as a reminder, if you think of during this call or after things that from a information side would help improve the delivery of your services or hit these goals, please feel free to email wired@info. So sorry, wired.info@tn.gov. And so we'll be happy to try to support any kind of data requests that you might have. And then fourth is promoting the structure. Yeah.
Sorry, Ben, it's Myra. Are you supposed to be sharing a screen or
Oh,
you're not?
thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
I was not sure.
Thank you for that. I was distracted by the owl. All right. We
There
can
we
see it
go.
now. All right.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So this was the beautiful slide that was beginning things and then becoming the best public workforce system in the nation. And now I am in bullet point number 4 of promoting the improvement in structure and delivery of services, which basically I would summarize as, hey, let's not ask participants their same information multiple times, right? They only need to tell us their life story one time. And then finally, and then this is the one that I'm most excited about, is what is the overall objective of all this is to secure folks' family sustaining wages, meet employer needs, and enhance the productivity of Tennessee so that Tennessee can grow as a whole. So so that means that even though it might say Northern Middle on some of these numbers coming up, this is a collaborative effort. That's kind of the purpose of KPIs. And so if things go wrong, if things go well, it's on both of us. And so definitely I will point out some things where we on the state side could definitely improve things to make it easier for you all to hit those objectives. Next up, talking about federal performance, one thing that I just wanted to throw out there is we have this locked down, I would say, in terms of we are a very high performing state. In fact, some would say we lean on federal performance a little bit too much, right? So I do think that we have to hit those, but also we have a bit of a cushion that we've worked through, right? So yeah, so some weaknesses of federal performance is they are percentage based. So just to kind of do an example of this, so we have 2 different LWDAs, LWDA-A and LWDA-B. One serves 160 folks. Of those, 128 find jobs. In this second scenario, 15 participants are served, but only 13 find jobs. Which of these local workforce boards would consider to be most successful according to federal performance? And
B.
guess B, right? So that is true as relates to federal performance, but when you think about it, and when we were asked the state board the same question, overwhelmingly the response was it really should be A, right? Because A, 128 jobs is a lot more impactful for those 128 people and also for Tennessee's economy as a whole. So KPIs are kind of developed to kind of plug in that gap of, and so what that looks like in terms of the soft power of federal performance um, is that as a result, our enrollments have been declining year over year. So this is an example from Weiner Pizer before KPIs came out, and then this is what Weiner Pizer looks like now. As you can see that we actually not only reversed several year trend, but we actually had an uptick there. So looking forward to talking about that a little bit deeper later. Secondly, on federal performance, they kind of have convoluted measures, right? We have whole hour plus long trainings on exactly what those mean, and this is included and this isn't included. So we want to avoid those where possible with KPIs. We want to be clear in what we're asking for. And then third and finally, there's this kind of concept of overlapping cohorts, right? So while the top of the report might say PY21 quarter three, it actually might represent up to 5 overlapping cohorts, right? And so the reason that I bring this up is I think Northern Middle knows this quite well, but when you're talking to your local board, make sure that they understand that should a federal performance measure be missed, when did it actually occur, right? Like when were your services delivered? And so that can help provide context on um, in order to understand how you could correct that perhaps deficit. People have to know that maybe it happened 2.5 years ago by a different provider, right? So just to be very clear on that. So with all those kind of convolutes and footnotes said, we want to make sure that we're measuring the right thing, right? So hopefully KPIs are that thing. WIOA and putting WIOA within the context of Tennessee. So moving into feedback, as I've said, this is kind of the 5th time that we've done this. Yeah.
Can you go back to that federal one slide, please? The federal performance measures. Okay. So, Ben, just for everybody on this call, really Title I and Title III are the only programs that you measure against these standards, that you produce reports.
So just to pull back to the scorecard, okay, so these are the ones that we're producing currently for the scorecard, which is adult, dislocated worker, youth, and minor Pizer. To your point, Title I, Title III.
Okay, thank you.
That's not the whole picture though, because we also have VR and CSEP, and I don't think I'm even going to be able to name them all off the top of my head. But basically, it gets even more complex with this, right? Because it's not only what each KPI, or it's not, sorry, what each federal performance measure was, but it also is kind of averaged across in a column and in a row about how each of the different titles, including Title II, adult education is another one I didn't mention. And their performance is our performance. So basically, it'll get averaged across, it'll get averaged as a column for each measure and each title. And those columns and rows also have to meet certain thresholds as well. So I could even add that as another 4th convoluted thing as well. But I do think, could I read into that question that we should probably be providing you the scorecard inclusive of all of our partners, so that you all know what's going on with AE and VR? Okay, so I'll put that in my increasing to-do list. Cool. And yeah, all right. Thank you. Great question. All right, so more feedback. This is kind of generalized feedback that I'll address first. Is as we've entered in our 5th year of doing this, 2 main pieces of feedback. One is focus on WIOA wide objectives rather than program specific ones. And so basically, last year we had 23 KPIs, right? So if we were moving higher than the program and looking for what we were trying to achieve as a whole, perhaps we could reduce those. And secondly is being effective is more important than being busy. And so we want to, where possible, shift to outcome-based measures as well. So that's kind of been our kind of our guideposts. How we've kind of responded to those critiques are we are kind of working towards those kind of higher level KPIs. Something that would be probably something like Drive to 55, aka like an education centric goal, which would touch on these 4 tenets of WIOA. Might want to look like we might want to look for something like a labor force participation metric. Notice I did not say labor force participation rate. I did some napkin math between last call and this call, and for people who think that numbers are fun, 1% of the 2022 labor force is 34,100 folks. So if we take our overall goal, which in context is 5% growth, then increasing by 1% would be increasing our KPI target by 2,061 fold, right? So that is orders of magnitude higher than what we were asking. And so I would hope that if we were able to move in this space, we would have a count-based metric rather than a percentage-based metric. How many people do we move across the line from you weren't in the workforce to in the workforce? Because I do think that we do good work, but I think we have to be aware about where we are at currently to set a fair, reasonable, and sustainable goal.
I agree 100% with your comments there. And I think the tool on the Department of Labor's website where you can drill down by county and determine how many people are going to have to go to work to move that needle. It's a rather daunting task. And I just don't know how the numbers are calculated. And I think by being able to keep up with how many people you're putting to work might be a better measure of movement than the actual rate itself. So I agree with your comments.
Right. And it's not just about fairness. I think it's also about being operational in terms of what we can actually move the needle on. And I think it'd be much more helpful to a mayor to say, we got X amount of people across the line and we want to do Y next year. Right. So thank you. The third one, and this is one that we're actually close enough that we're on the pilot stage on, is securing living wages. So just to go a little bit further on that one is we want to, where possible, align with MIT. They have a living wage calculator that's been active for more than a decade now. And it's basically the short version of this is it just sums the expected costs and it has 3 variables that depends on the so it's just not one number, right? Just like the poverty level is a formula, the living wage is also a formula. So what does it look like? What does it look at rather? It looks at geography, aka where someone lives. And so basically this is kind of my color-coded map of trying to find patterns there. So basically all these, sorry for not labeling these, but all of the counties in the same colors have the same living wage. So we can see there in northern middle, there's kind of a Davidson County cluster there. And then the second piece is looking at household size, right? So if you have a bigger family, you probably need to be making a different amount of income. And then third is what is the makeup of your family? So just an example that I like to look at is if you have 2 adults, both of them working with 1 kid, they probably need to be making a very different wage than perhaps a single mom with 2 kids, right? So we also need to factor in the makeup of the family as well.
Hey, can you go back to that county page real quick?
Yeah.
And what are the color codes on there?
They're just I was just trying to find, they're not even like a scale, like it's not even like a heat map kind of thing. I was just looking for basically to get in a little bit of the weeds of this. We can't scrape MIT's website because they have pretty good security on that. So I was just clicking in one county at a time to see what their wages or the living wage model suggested for that county, looking at a family of three, two adults, one working, one child. And so I was just trying to grok in my mind about what does their patterns look like. Basically the question that I was trying to solve with this was, is it MSA based in terms of how the costs are associated? And it seems to be somewhat, but not entirely. And so this kind of comment here is saying, um, rather than look at wage buckets, so I'm also trying to figure out how do I square this round peg, uh, and as we do not currently, I don't think that we would be able to, the first year at least, pay for MIT's information to get the full table. We probably have to make some shortcuts, and this is kind of one of the shortcuts I think that might be helpful. For example, all the blue, we could perhaps just say, like, let's just use, I don't know, Overton County, just to throw that out there. While like the dark blue, we might say, what is Davidson? And so we could have, I was trying to figure out how many different subsets rather than going 95 deep on that. So and yeah, so more on living wage is this is kind of new slides here is the feds have a great tool, which I suggest those who want to dive deeper on this, is called 0722. And within that, it kind of defines what a good job is, or signs of a good job, rather, because most jobs are not going to have all of this list, right? But that includes things like recruitment and hiring, benefits, DEIA, empowerment and representation, job security, working conditions, organizational culture, pay, which is highlighted by living wage, which the feds are actually using MIT Living Wage Calculator too, which is great. So we're on the right track there. And then also opportunities for advancement. They also, within that Teagle, by the way, have opportunities for the American Job Center Network to engage on each of those 8 core tenants. So if this sounds fun, I know we have a lot of people on this call. We are developing this pilot. Please just email me at benjamin.passino@tn.gov, and I'll be happy to include you in the small group. There's a lot of decisions to be made here, a lot of fun data, and if that sounds great, just email me, and I'd be happy to include you in that conversation.
I trust you.
I appreciate that. Constructed feedback, continuing on. So I said we reduced the number of KPIs. So we actually reduced them from 23 to 13, which we're pretty excited about. There are some caveats here. There's kind of 2 buckets here that I just want to mention. First is funding dependent KPIs. And so basically, this is kind of a formalization of what has already been occurring in a lot of ways. So for NDWG, things like wildfires, incumbent workers, usually those are tied to funding, right? So we, the state, will give out a partial of funding, and usually there's strings attached to those. And so basically what we want to do from a KPI lens is just a match with those strings. So if you all had a wildfire, say, and according to the grant, it said you wanted to serve 100 folks, then the KPI would be 100 folks. And it would not have to be exactly in alignment with the program year. It would match with what we tell the feds. So that's the kind of vision on incumbent worker, natural dislocated worker. I will get into your comments, Marla, in 1 second. And then the on hold ones are with TANF, aka Families First. And so while they would love to continue on as a KPI, there's a lot going on that side of the fence. And so basically, just for those who are unaware, their service delivery is shifting from a provider-based system to moving that in-house, 1, and then 2, they're changing their case management system. So because of those 2 changes, they're going to hold off on KPIs for a little bit. They're going to take a breath. Hopefully they'll come back. And this last one, wage attainment of $14.79, that sounds a lot like living wage. And so they are open to aligning with whatever we come up with living wage on that one. So for now to Northern Middle's curveball, as it relates to this, all those comments were before we had your great constructive feedback on incumbent worker. And so for that, what we're going to do is pose that the incumbent workers that Northern Middle has the right to dedicate funding, Title I funding for. So we're going to do two things. One, we're just as spoiler alert, we're accepting the numbers that you proposed within Title I adult, and then we are also going to publish the what you're telling your local board, if that makes sense. So if you said $300,000 to serve a minimum 150 participants by the end of the program year, we would just echo that and we would just provide that as a supplement to the state board. We had, this is what I think our sixth conversation this week. And I know at least Greater Memphis wanted to take us up on doing something similar on that, which we just want to be fair across the board. I don't know how these KPIs work. And I believe Greater Memphis even has kind of their own report that they're publishing with their own, like a series of metrics. Incumbent worker is one of those. And what we've said then, and what I'll offer you is that if you all are producing some kind of similar document that you're presenting to your local board, we're happy to provide that to the state board as well, right? So it's just kind of I think it's helpful to provide context, right? About, hey, we might not be going as far as perhaps we might otherwise be if it wasn't for these local goals. And so it'd be helpful for them to see, where are you pushing and where are you, how effective are you in the areas that you're pushing for? So does that make sense? Does that kind of square with what you were kind of asking for?
Yes. So let me make sure I understand.
Yeah.
So last year, the incumbent worker was a subset of the adult and dislocated worker
Mhm.
funding streams and that KPI.
Right.
This year, you have reduced our KPI, and the incumbent worker will not be included in the adult and DW, but will stand on its own
Right.
at a
And so,
local level.
right, because there are some areas that we talked to, I think Upper Cumberland and Southern Middle in the top of my head, that they didn't think that as funding has been going down, they didn't think they had the ability to kind of siphon off funds from Title I. And so for that reason, we're going to just keep it at a local level in terms of it's up to you whether or not you have it. But I think in having it, it provides kind of detail that would be helpful to the state board to understand the service levels that's going on with Northern Middle. So this is just like hey, we want to give you this opportunity and to align with, I think that the goal should align with the service delivery model rather than the other way around, right? So that's what we're trying to do there. This graph is just showing the craziness that I'm looking at. So this is like that black line is the state's incumbent worker numbers. And so with West, Middle, East as subsets of those. And so with this craziness, this is why it's always been very difficult to set a KPI as it relates to incumbent workers. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to have it be like grassroots, like, does your local board want it? And I think it was Southern Middle who was saying it should be variable in terms of like, it might make sense this year to have IWT, but next year things might change, right? So things coming on and off as it makes sense to your local mission.
Okay, so one other question
Mhm.
about incumbent workers. One of the things that Megan and I were looking at this morning is for a variety of reasons, the primary one being that employers are notorious for delaying their submission of paperwork, the one-page application that we have. So let's just say we awarded a contract to a company in July. They started training. They may not send us the applications until, let's just say, October, for example.
Right.
But they're dated July 1 because that's when they started the training, or July 15th, whatever.
Mhm.
Are you looking, when you're capturing these numbers, are
Mhm.
you looking at just the physical quarter that is being judged? And is there any way that you ever go back and square that up by looking at a cumulative number in case there were enrollments that happened outside of the quarter?
Yeah, so this is just a broad statement over all KPIs. So if we go back to what's the purpose of KPIs, I think it's to give the state board the best information possible. And what I would say is we want to whatever report to be closest to reality in terms of like what is happening on the ground. This is not something that we are mandated by the Fed to do. There's no real cutoff date. And so for that reason, to your point, is uh, if something occurs in, say, this month in terms of an enrollment or an exit or whatever the KPI might be, but it's not recorded in the system for some reason until uh, we, after we ran the reports, there's two ways to address it. One, hey, hey Ben, there's a significant amount of folks that were keyed in late because my provider XYZ. Happy to rerun those. Also, just naturally, when I run each quarter, I will rerun all the quarters, 5 quarters back. So that should capture most of it. And then if there's a special exception of beyond that, just let us know. We'll be happy to rerun things. Our policy in terms of data entry is same day, extenuating of circumstances, same business week. But we know while that might be ideal, that there are crazy circumstances, right? So, um, I answer your question there? And in terms of the data reporting, and then in terms of how it's reporting to how best to report this local information to your state board as a local metric, I'll leave you that up to you whether or not you want to do create date or training date or issued payment dates, whatever makes most sense to you in terms of uh,
We're good, thank you.
all right. I skipped ahead to incumbent worker. Okay, so okay, yeah. So we talked about those. Living wage is the kind of the second response to those two pieces of feedback that we just went through. As it is, we owe a wide measure and it is outcome based. The next piece is a feedback, general feedback was, hey state, as our funding is going down, could you please pursue additional sources of funding? And so what I've been saying here was, I think the summer youth work experience is a good example of that, where we're looking to the state legislature and hopefully we can do really well with that and show that this needs to be a recurring fund for that. And then secondly, I've been highlighting the work that you did, Marla, with Fort Campbell Strong in terms of you basically wrote that grant, right? And then the state put our letterhead on it. We're definitely open to continuing partnerships like that too. So the next piece of general criticism was the KPIs targets should be sent out sooner, enabling you all to put the KPIs inside of the contracts. We definitely think that is a best practice that we want to enable wherever possible. Recognizing that this is, I believe, the third year in a row that we have not actually sent out the targets by the start of the program year. I wanted to put a stopgap in. So if you noticed in the email that I think was sent about a month ago now, when I send out the PY23 state level guidance, I also gave you the forecasted target for PY24, and hopefully that will be good as a fallback should we not be able to have this conversation before July 1st of next year. So basically, as an example, for JVSG, last year we had a goal of 440. This year they have a goal of 442, and I said, hey, subject matter expert of JVSG, if we're able to hit 442, what would you want the goal to be that following year? So when you would write contracts for JVSG, if that even makes sense, it would be something like 448. So that's hopefully as a
Ben, I think that's great, and I think it's good to look at a forecast, but there's
Mhm.
so many things like funding
Right.
that we can't automatically assume growth each year.
Right.
But as a target, yeah, but it might have to be adjusted.
Right, and if you notice, like, RISA is a good example where, we did 196 last year, asking for 236 this year, and, when we're asked the subject matter expert for RISA, we said, "We're okay continuing at 236," because that one is a kind of a percentage-based thing, and so I think that is helpful to see, like, at least and you're right, 12 months can change funding, it can change a lot of things, and so the idea with KPIs is continuing to look at them every year. This is in no means set in stone, but I think something is better than nothing in kind of uh very rough terms. And so again, this is just another resource. If it's not helpful, we don't need to continue to provide it. But I just thought uh it would be most helpful to provide you the actual targets before July 1st. But if we're unable to do that, hopefully those forecasted numbers might be somewhat useful. Moving into local board specific feedback as it relates to this current process that we're in now. Um, uh, Kind of four main comments. One, which was kind of repeated throughout, was increasing, and I think we might have just touched on it just now, is increasing enrollments while decreasing funding year over year compromises service delivery quality, which I'll go into a much more detail in a second. Just looking at this kind of chat. Okay. Um, yes. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand or just shout out. Secondly, is what is the American Job Center's impact on the ability to secure living wages? Which is that Teagle that I just referenced there. It does a good job describing that. And third is incumbent worker, which we just went through. Fourth is points of KPI contact at the state, which is I need to finish out, and I will send out accompanying this recording and the slides. So where are we at? I think we've talked about this in kind of detail at this point, but we are right here of negotiating the state targets before July 1st. Again, apologies for not getting that across the line. And I think the solution here is just kind of basically move back all of this by like 2 months. So hopefully next year we can better secure those goals on time. So we've kind of determined how big the pie is, right? We have determined how aggressive we want to be this year. So this call is kind of like the final piece of figuring out how do we slice that pie. Jumping into the nitty gritty here, the first up is adult dislocated worker new enrollment. This is what the state looks like, this black line with the grand regions below it. This is what it looks like for Northern Middle with the goal, the kind of lowered goal that you all proposed of 250 per quarter. And then there's some feedback here because of the incumbent worker conversation, and then more incumbent worker conversation. And then this is kind of getting back to that quote that I gave from Southeast. So about what do we do when funding is decreasing but expectations are increasing. And so there are two big pieces of feedback that we would like to make sure that everyone is aware of. First is something that I'm calling SBPs, or service-based participants. And so I think we had a great conversation with Troy and Matt as relates to the Title I adult dislocated worker and youth subject matter experts. And we thought it'd be a great idea to kind of formalize this thing that's kind of already been batted around for a few years now, right? About saying in a scenario where funding is tight, you can still enroll people, right? Like that's what the state has been saying. And so I think it would be beneficial to everyone to define that, right? To say what services would be beneficial to participants that still trigger participation, that still have them be able to achieve their goals, but at the same time might not be a direct participant cost. That is kind of the cost already associated with having staff that can have one-on-one staff time to pursue those goals. So I think that would be a great training to coordinate with the TA Tuesday folks as relates to that. So I know you rumor mill has it that you're going to / you're in a work first approach. Is that right, Marla?
That is correct, and especially our 4 counties that have labor force participation rates lower than the state average. But I'm agreeing with everything you're saying as long as you're also looking at lowering or removing that minimum participant cost rate.
So so some response on that one is that while the amount of folks, but so in this scenario where we've kind of bifurcated enrollment to SBPs and the flip side of SBPs of where we're doing, I think I've said this on a few calls now, but like when people ask me on an elevator, what do I do? My shorthanded response is I help run a convoluted scholarship program, right? And so I think that sentiment is increasingly less true than it has been in the past, right? So we do much more than just provide scholarships and even supportive services, right? And so that's one piece is like there's this other thing. So I think clarifying, crystallizing what this other thing would be helpful. And as it relates to MPCR, I think that even though we might be doing a workforce approach, if you want to put it in that lens, or we are serving SBPs, that money that would have been going to Group A is now available to the people that were doing direct participant costs, if that makes sense. So we could still spend the same amount of money in terms of buckets. So my understanding of MPCR is it's line item based, like how much money did you spend on training, right? Even if that training goes to less people, if the ITA caps were perhaps extended, or we could provide even more supportive services that we kind of talk about in these calls, right? Like housing support, child care support that we talk a lot about, but we haven't really seen a lot of those expenses. Then we could still hit those MPCR numbers. So I think this is an opportunity. And again, this is just a how do we uh, provide you as a local board the most flexibility that we can while still aligning with that ask from leadership. So this is, I'm sure this is a bountiful conversation as it relates to what line items count where. There's another chunk of conversation that we had around IWT as relates to MPCR, right? Should they or shouldn't they be included as a direct participant cost? I think right now, I don't know, flipping back and forth between who's on this call. Ryan and another conversation brought up that currently it's kind of a neutral approach in terms of money spent on IWT is kind of taken out of the denominator and the numerator, right? So it's kind of uh, a neutral way. It's not going to help you. It's not going to hurt you. Is that is the current take
Which
on.
by the way is stupid because it should count because it's a service to an employer which individuals are benefiting from. But
Right.
anyhow, a net gain is better than
Right.
no gain.
Right. And so just so you know, that conversation is taking place right now about whether or not that should be included in MPCR. And I think that any comments that you have would be well received to Justin Atkinson would probably be the best person I would redirect those comments to. And of course, Ivan Greenfield and Brian Hurley as well. So we know that there's conversation around this, and Southern Middle's comment as relates to this was, again, it might be adaptive. It might be like, does it make sense this year or not, kind of thing. So recognizing that there is soft power as it relates to directing the service delivery on how performance is being captured on things like MPCR. So cool. The second one, do we have anyone from budgets on the call? I'm not seeing folks. So the second piece, so we talked about kind of service delivery strategy. as point number one. Point number two is money. And so where funding is available, which is a big asterisk, right? Then we want to try to be proactive about redistributing funds as it relates to core programs. So what that would mean is something like, I think Marla, you were the one who had the great suggestion about, hey, when we send out these reports to the state board, particularly as it relates to get to quarter three and quarter four of the year, could we please frame that into annual achievement of the target rather than did you perhaps hit the quarter three and quarter four? And I think what that will allow us to do is kind of anticipate quarter four. And so there's a scenario this year where Greater Memphis did, I think, like 135% of their adult and dislocated worker goal by the end of quarter three. And in the traditional mindset of we're a convoluted scholarship program, their service provider enrolled, I think, 30% of their quarter four goal. So that being said, I think that was a learning opportunity in terms of, hey, we the state need to be proactive and saying, hey, it seems like you might run out of money here. If we had discretionary funds, perhaps giving those to a high performing area might make sense. So that was the second kind of big takeaway there. We just kind of, so that was a whole lot about adult and dislocated worker. This is my kind of cheat sheet on this, and I'm noticing that there's immediately an error here. So there's a lot of colors here, and so just to kind of talk through this a little bit is this number here was the number that the state initially asked. So for adult dislocated workers, we initially asked for 1,062. Northern Middle came back with 1,000. And then the kind of hearing your all's feedback, the purple number is what the state is asking. So so we would kind of agree to your 1,000 here. And then these green numbers, and something went wrong here, apologize, is just making sure that the numbers that you all pose added up to that one. So that's why they'd be green. And then the yellows is something like, hey, you agreed that we should do 147, but we also said something like flat. You can't exactly divide 147 by 4, right? And so I just did 36, 37, 37. So that's just, a small thing to just want to point it out. And then finally is like the red, which was just saying that like, hey, you want to make sure that we check in on youth, which is our most volatile program, sans incumbent worker, two seasonal things to just to kind of double check on the quarterly breakout there. Yeah, so just talking about this 1,000, I guess it would be most appropriate to switch back to this graph. Do you think you are okay with the 1,000 that you all proposed for adult dislocated worker?
Yes, and I look back at what we did last year, and I looked at the National Dislocated Worker Grant and our concerted effort to enroll as many folks in that is what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that while we didn't achieve our KPI for the adult and dislocated worker, I think if you look at those together, I think we would have hit it. So even with the funding cut, I think we can do 1,000.
Right. And then one other thing that I wanted to address is this 165 and this 152. I'm not sure if it's the point that you were just raising, but were there any kind of gaps that we should be aware of in terms of providers or because I know that was a fairly big dip between what they all normally do, and it seemed to be that it was could be isolated to the Title I adult specifically. Maybe that's some more sleuthing for another time, but
Yeah,
just wanted,
yeah. I don't know of anything, and I know that we've got Liz and Renee, and I'm not sure if we've got any more from EDSI. Please, if you all have any comments, you're more than welcome to jump in.
All right. Well, this is probably a good opportunity to say that one of the things I know that the state keeps on reshuffling things around, but one of the things that we are looking forward to is Brian has been having his fiscal calls, right, from a fiscal side, and also Justin from Program Integrity is also looking forward to doing something similar from the kind of service delivery side and the KPIs as part of that. So hopefully we can have those conversations throughout the year rather than this convoluted one where I'm trying to do the whole year plus KPI negotiations all at the same time. So moving on to the next one, which should be apprenticeship. So this is kind of tangential, right? Like this is another group of people, but just to be aware of, as we are all WIOA, they are looking at peak enrollment in terms of apprenticeships. So if you have folks that would be great in that program, please refer them there. And then with Middle Tennessee, your key contact is, of course, Greg. And the second KPI that they're looking at is expanding the number of state certified apprenticeship programs. And so similarly, when you're talking with employers, if you think that, oh, hey, this would be a great fit for apprenticeships, please just refer them on there. Cool. For JVSG, this is kind of
Let me go back one
Yeah.
second to apprenticeships.
Yeah.
I know we had requested around $200,000 of apprenticeship funding, and that
Mhm.
was reduced to 148 or something like that.
Mhm.
We have already received more applications and interest in apprenticeship funding than what we have available in financial opportunities to award. So I'll just say that if you all have any areas that are not achieving or spending their money on that, I believe that we could help you out.
That's great to note. Do we have any apprenticeship folks on this call? I know it's hard to attend all 9 of them, but this will be recorded, and I'll pass that along for sure. JVSG, we're doing rather well in terms of each quarter. We've kind of been growing since COVID. One thing to note here, and this is kind of a large change, is that they have for forever now they have had the issue of JVSG staff leaving, right? And one of the main reasons is because a lot of the times that the participants jobs that they were finding were making more money than they were, right? So one of the things that I think that Jeff and his team did a great job on was kind of work with HR to consolidate a lot of positions. And so as a result of that, they are now offering higher salaries. And so hopefully that will translate to you as a local board will hopefully have staff there longer with more experience, and hopefully that will also translate to higher enrollment and higher caseloads. So this is what it looks like for Tennessee, and then this is for JBSG. I think we were just both on the same page about this here. Yeah. For justice involved, this is one where I think it's we've been doing great, right? Spikes in enrollment. Northern Middle even more so. And so I think a lot of this is trying to have in the system the great work that we're already doing, right? About making sure that participants are tagged appropriately. And I definitely want to commend the reentry team for getting across the line the ability for participants to self-identify as justice involved. I think I saw Luke on here earlier. Yeah. Luke, do you have any additional comments as it relates to reentry?
No, I have no comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
And
So my only thought about the justice involved is when I look at the numbers and I see Northern Middle's goal of 1,069 and the next highest is Greater Memphis at 502, less than 50% of what our number is. You know, it's kind of like beating a dead horse. I feel like that, yes, we're doing a great job, but is it that the other areas are not, or why are we serving, you know, more than some of these other areas that should have, I would think, as much opportunity as we do?
Right. And so the way that we set out the guidance for the local boards this year was we divided uh, the ask divided by local workforce board rather than so we had the statewide ask, which I believe was what, Luke? It was like a 50% increase, something
Yeah.
wild like that from
Yeah.
over last year, right? Because to your point, across the state, we had these huge spikes. That being said, just because we grow doesn't mean we need to equally grow with those, right? So we if you notice, this 130 to 267 is a huge jump. But that being said, this jump is not nearly what you all served last year, right? So we're kind of over time, we'll be narrowing that gap should the enrollments not continue to balloon. So that's one point. The second point is we divided the state goal into grand planning region based on the potential to serve was the next piece that we did. So say Middle Tennessee had 40% of the potential to serve, we gave them 40% of the goal. And then from there, we broke it out into local workforce area. To your point, based on to a large degree historical performance on that. And so basically those are the two factors that I have available to divide goals on is potential, money, and historical. And so that's basically all I have. And so this is another thing where if like as a piece of feedback, if it makes sense for like we did in previous years for Grand Middle to get together and stopping at the Grand Regional level and then figuring out how to break that out. I think that perhaps makes sense as an alternative. I will say that for Justice Involved particularly, the goals, while they sound ambitious, are very much achievable given what we were able to do last year.
And, you know, I think it's just opportunity to say, you know, what a great job the team in Northern Middle has done in serving those justice involved individuals. So hats off to them for excelling.
Agreed. The other thing that was mentioned on another call was, hey, are other partners included on this? And they definitely are. So just to be aware, this is Adult Education's new service provider map, as they contribute a significant portion as it relates to justice involves. On RISA, on Dixon, on Vixen, on Prancer, for RISA, this is kind of what we're looking like for Tennessee as a whole. We were really excited this year because we are within spitting distance of our guidance. And so for a review of our, I think it's been in like 8 years now, guidance has been 50% of the folks who show up to REIS orientation need to be referred to Title I. And then 25% of those who are referred need to actually be co-enrolled. So to a more straightforward thing, I think might be 12.5% of those who show up to orientation need to be co-enrolled. And so that means things like giving frontline staff enough time to make that co-enrollment, right? If we only give them 20 minutes, they can probably only do the recess spiel. They won't have enough time to actually getting them through VOS for that co-enrollment. So so that's kind of where we came to for our RISA goals this year. And so this is what Northern Middle looks like. So you all have been upticking recently, except for this most recent quarter here. And then I also wanted to shout out Southern Middle for kind of continuing to grow quarter after quarter. And just some news there is in the conversation that we had with them most recently, I think it was 2 days ago, They were saying that their OSO has been kind of like nose to the grindstone on this about being really active and making sure that we can get folks not only referred but actually co-enrolled. So, do we have Gail on this one? Looks like she was not able to make this one, but any additional comments as it relates to RISA? Oh,
So
I do have one more. Okay, go ahead.
let me ask you a quick question. So when I look at the spreadsheet for
Mhm.
Northern Middle, I see the number 49. But are we really looking at, what'd you say, 12.5% of the referrals are co-enroll? So
12.5% of those who attend orientation.
that attend orientation. But where does the 49 number come in?
So the 49, and again, it's like what data we have available. Um, so I'll say two things. Is one, RISA numbers are a bit unpredictable. The guidance I think is probably the most fair, reasonable, sustainable goal. I think these counts are kind of a little bit shooting from the hip, and they're shooting from the hip based on historical levels of who's been showing up for orientations, who's been selectable for RISA. And as we know, unemployment can vary quite broadly, right? So some economists are thinking that the economy is going to tank this year. If so, we could have 10 times as many people show up for RISA than we might expect otherwise. And then the other comment I just wanted to make was that RISA this year has to do a kind of a mandatory experiment related to the outcomes of RISA participants. And so just to be aware is they're going to take a subset, I believe Gail was saying in a previous call, about a third of folks who would be qualified for RISA will actually not be selected for RISA orientation. That's going to be the control group, and they're going to compare the outcomes to, I believe, another third, is what I heard. So basically, the idea, as it relates to your point, what is the potential to serve? It's going to be a little bit less, not even a little bit. It's going to be a portion of those are not going to be uh, able to attend RISA orientation that they might otherwise. And so that is that the numbers might be lower than expected, and then the numbers might be much higher than expected in terms of the unemployment thing. And so what we kind of went with for the 12, 12, 13, like the 49 as a total is roughly the same that we did last year. So that's kind of where those numbers came from. What's next? We have CSEP. So with CSEP, we had a separate call on this, and we had some great feedback from the CSEP providers. Basically, last year we had two goals. We were looking at new enrollment, and then also other people who exited, how many entered into unsubsidized employment, which of course is like the primary purpose of CSEP, which we continue to want to track. But we thought for this particular year, for the next 12 months, we want to focus in on new enrollment. And why is because these are the number of vacancies across the system for CSEP. And so basically, anytime this red line is above the green line, we are having more and more slots open. So basically, the goal for this year is at the provider level. So you all have a little bit of TCSA in your counties, right? So Stewart, Montgomery, Houston, Cheatham, Humphreys, they will be tasked with, because they have 30 slots, to enroll 10 folks, aka 1/3 of the number of slots they have. So that's the goal that they've been asked to do there, and that is by the end of the year. Enroll 1/3 of their slots, and that is really not a growth goal. There's a number of different challenges going on with CSEP. That is a kind of stabilize goal. Some other notes that I wanted to make sure that folks on this call were aware of was one, CSEP providers asked that they be included in the business services team meetings. Is that the case in Northern Middle? Are they already on the schedule or being included in the invites?
George, did you include them in when you sent it out to the partners?
Yes, I did.
Cool. And then secondly, do we have Nestor on this call? Yeah, there's many other calls happening simultaneously this week, so definitely forgive folks for missing. To echo some of the points that he's making, another call is the spread between what CSEP can currently do, which is subsidize half the salary that they would have been given against the market rate, is quite significant, right? So minimum wage is considerably lower than say $15 or $20 an hour. And so one of the things that they're working on is trying to work with the FBO to kind of narrow that gap there. In addition to not only pay but also hours, right? And then I always want to make the point too is we definitely want the needs of the participant to trump any performance, whether or not that be state or federal performance. And so if there's a scenario where you have someone who might be eligible for CSEP and you could hook them up with a host agency making $725, but you could also give them a $15 job, we definitely want to lean on the $15 an hour job, right? So that's going to be more beneficial to the participant there. And the last piece of the feedback that we got from CSEP was we want to audit some of these employers, right? So I think unfortunately what's been happening is some of these host agencies are just kind of accepting free labor and not aligning with CSEP's mission. So one of the things that we also want to do this year is audit the host agencies and encourage our providers to make sure that they're also cultivating new host agencies as well. And then lastly, here's some provider contact information. The link is on the bottom about all the contact information there, because I know that's been an issue in some places.
Hey.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question? If you can go back to the map, I want to explain something.
Yeah.
Right there. So Workforce Essentials received a CSEP grant.
Mm-hmm.
And we've currently got, I think our last payroll, we had 110 older workers on our payroll since July 1. But
Can I ask,
George,
is that a national grant, right?
yeah,
Okay.
that's what I wanted to explain.
Mhm.
We are a sub-grantee under the national nonprofit grant to the National Council on Aging. So our numbers don't count in this statewide map that you've got there, because our numbers roll up under the National Council on the Aging and their national grant. So
Right.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. So Natalie George is Natalie and Sharon Hancock are running that program for us. And I think it's good that you include them, but we also have to go back to Robin Last and well, I guess Robin is the only person in our area, and then Natalie would cover the other counties, but not her numbers wouldn't count.
And it's my understanding, because on our last quarterly cross training, Robin announced that she was going to be leaving July 14th. Is that the case?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
And I think that's a great point, Marla, about that's always been a bit awkward too, especially like when you are the, I don't even know what you call it, the sub recipient of those funds, as relates to older workers, which I think is great in terms of the service delivery map of CSEP. I will say it's back. I think it might be the comfort worker is a good example of this, where if you are currently reporting CSEP in the capacity of, what was it, Workforce Essentials, or NC, I didn't quite write down those acronyms down, but if you're reporting CSEP in some capacity to your local board, I think it'd be totally appropriate for you to add that into a local KPI in terms of if you're seeing similar trends, which I imagine you are, as it relates to CSEP, in terms of there seems to be a significant gap between the purpose of CSEP and the market, and also older workers are most susceptible to COVID and might be rightfully fearful of working, right? So there's all kinds of factors that go into this, and if anything, I think everyone would benefit from knowing, what's going on with Northern Middle.
Well, and you
Oh,
were
we got
exactly.
we got Nestor on here. Um,
Hi,
are you
Nestor.
jumping in on a comment here?
No, I'm just listening in because she's right. So
Mhm.
I'm just listening in. Hey, George. Hey, guys. Hey, Liz. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm sorry. I just got off another meeting.
Oh, cool.
Thank you,
So
Ben.
basically what we were talking about, Nestor, just to catch you up, is does it make sense for Northern Middle to perhaps provide information from who did you say it was, NCOA or Workforce Essentials?
Yes, NCOA there.
Yeah.
So the National Council on
Mhm.
Aging is the national grantee, and
Mhm.
we're the sub grantee for
Mhm.
Tennessee for them.
Okay. So if you would like to provide information for CSEP as it relates to Workforce Essentials to your local board and perhaps your state board, we'd be open to sharing that as well. So that's the kind of there. Any other comments on CSEP? All right. For SNAP ENT, this is what we looked like at a state. Notably, we had this as a KPI before when we didn't this past year, and it's coming back. And the reason why we had that ping-ponging around was it used to be the case, and now it is the case again, where we are under the understanding that if we serve more SNAP ENT folks, we might be able to receive more money from DHS. Like we said, we want to pursue additional sources of funding. And so that is why we are moving SNAP ENT back to the new enrollment KPI there. And this is kind of what it looks like for Northern Middle. And I just wanted to make a note here. I know that this is a little bit indirect, but notably here that this 294 is a bit of an aggressive goal, especially as it relates to the most recent quarter here. So just as make sure everybody's aware, the goal is 294 per quarter here for SNAP ENT. Any kind of general comments here? On to trade. So with trade, while we have not been able to hit this 90% goal, which will continue on to the next year, I did want to give a shout out to Myra and her team here. Were you on this call? Nope.
I am.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Would you have any comments as it relates to trade's performance?
I don't know if Marla have any comments, but I do not.
Mhm.
We're gonna keep the percentage, no changes on that,
Right.
just to, um, and I know that Northern Middle, they're always notorious and they're doing a great job in that.
Mhm.
So kudos to you guys. And any questions regarding who can we serve? I know that in the previous call we have a question that there was misunderstanding to who can be
Mhm.
served. It is not only current participants, we also can serve participant cover under previous petitions. So when we determine eligibility, when we send those referrals for co-enrollment, so the expectation is for Title I to co-enroll, whoever meet the eligibility criteria for the program.
And I definitely know that this is a very complex setup with the sunsetting and all those kind of caveats there too. So I definitely want to give you all a shout out to the work that you've done in Northern Middle. And in fact, the state is being recognized as a national best practice for our work within trade. And so we'll be hosting a training, I think next month. Is that right, Myra?
Yep.
With NASWA.
September
Yep.
13.
Okay, cool. So um, thank you for your continued effort in the co-enrolling folks in trade and Title I. So with Wagner Pizer, we actually talked about this right in the beginning, ages ago of this call, and we reversed this trend. This is what we look like as a state, and then Northern Middle looks very similar. Marla, do you want to give a shout out to your team as it relates to Wagner Pizer continuing to grow? Was this kind of just kind of a general cultural shift where we wanted to make sure that people walk through the door got co-enrolled within Wagner Pizer?
Hey, I'm always happy to give a shout out and say what a great team that we have here. I also want to open the door. I believe
Mhm.
Georgina was on the phone too, or on the call, and
Mhm.
she might have some insight as well.
Good afternoon. Yes, they have actually put forth a greater effort in trying to make sure that they are enrolling as many Wagner-Pfizer participants. It's been intentional. It's been a concerted effort in the AJCs across the board because we realize, everyone's not walking in. So as we are making those contacts, making sure that they're entering those. So thank you to everyone, because if someone comes in, it takes everybody making sure that the right person gets the information so that it can be entered. So to all the team leads and to all the leads, period, Wagner Pizer, you rock. Continue to do what you're doing. I so appreciate you. I can't say thank you enough. I tell them thank you on a daily basis, but before everyone here, thank you so much and continue to set the standard high. Thank you. I
Ben,
can't hear
you're
anymore. Look.
muted, Ben.
Yes, so look, something happened. I couldn't hear y'all, so I don't know what happened. What you say, Ben? Did you say something good and I missed it?
I just said kudos, and I muted myself. So apologies.
I heard him say how great Georgina was and that she's just awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, Marla, I owe you lunch. Thanks.
It was also set in iambic pentameter to a tune as well.
Okay.
All right. So next up we have Title I Youth. So this is where we look at a statewide. And so this is what Northern Middle looks like. And so we did have a little bit of a disagreement, if you want to put it in that context, about what the goal might look like for this coming year. And so basically, just to summarize this is we took into account that the fact that your funding was decreasing, right? And what we kind of are proposing is kind of splitting the difference between what the state initially asked and what you are proposing about meeting in the middle at 460. Does that make sense to you?
It is agreeable to us, and thank you for being willing to make that adjustment.
Yeah, and just so you know, I echoed what you did in your proposal in terms of the quarterly breakout. So I did like if the first quarter was 18%, I did 18% of the goal in that way. So that would be the 97, 115, 116, 132 as the breakout there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Do we have Troy? Sorry, I keep on asking if people are on
I'm
the
here.
call. There's so many people on the call that I literally cannot see everybody on the little Teams thing here. So
I'm here.
do you have any shout outs to Northern Middle or any comments?
No, I appreciate them working with us. I know they wanted it a little further down, but Northern Middle is always doing a great job on their youth, and I really appreciate it. And they really think outside the box when it comes to youth participation. So thank y'all. Great.
And it seems like you all were very quick out of the gate with the statewide enrollments here. So thank you for that quick turnaround. And it just shows your great partnership skills, I would say. Next up is in-school youth, and just so we know, this is the statewide, and this is what it looks like for Northern Middle. I'd say that this is clearly a best practice where you are growing leaps and bounds quarter to quarter. Is this something that you brought in a new provider for in-school youth?
So kind of interesting. We did bring on 3 new providers last year, July 1 of 2022. And one of them was a totally in-school youth program, so that helped us raise our numbers. However, with our reduction in funding that we had this year, those 3 providers, we elected not to renew their contracts.
Okay.
The in-school youth program was the Jobs for Tennessee Graduates, which is a well-known program that focuses only on in-school. But so we will expect and know that MAC and EDSI's youth programs will be able to achieve these goals.
So
They're tremendous, right, Tanya? All right.
Yeah.
So, Marla, would you perhaps want to make a little bit more of a pointed statement as a result to the impact of funds and the number of enrollments that you could achieve on that? Connect those dots of you're not having this great best practice because.
Well, because one of the reduction in funding that we have, our best practice was that we set aside funding specifically for in-school youth.
Right.
And with that reduction in funding, we've got to take a step back,
Right.
and it will revert back to our regular contracts with not a specific emphasis only on in school. That one contractor was knocking it out of the park with their in school enrollment. So it's kind of a it was a good thing, but that good thing went away.
Well, I guess like for the purposes of perhaps a clip that might be sent to people, what would happen if you had that source of funding again?
We were really pleased with the results of the Jobs for Tennessee Graduates program. And I think that we would definitely be looking at entertaining them again. The other two, we had mixed results. We had three KPIs that were based upon financial goals, and the Jobs for Tennessee Graduates program was the only one that received that hit and met all of the benchmarks on the financial KPIs.
Right.
So yeah, I think if we had more money, we would definitely be looking at renewing or giving them funding again. I also believe that one of the goals of the board was that we want to make sure that we're developing new local providers. And so that as we go to bid out again, instead of having all your eggs in one basket, you can have a multitude of providers out there that are providing good services. So our intent, we met with those three providers. Again, just JTG excelled and outdid the other two.
Great. Troy, did you have any other comments?
No,
okay.
Good.
All right. For in-school youth and like, why do we have this as a KPI at all? I just wanted to make sure that people are on the same page. It's 30% of the whatever we agreed upon for the youth. And the reason why is we want to make sure that we maintain our waiver to allow you to all to have as much flexibility as you do to serve up to 50% youth, right? And so that's important there. So are you okay? Do I have a graph here? Yeah, so this is the same thing here. Are you okay with 30% of what we agreed to for youth being in school youth as a goal?
Correct. I'd already done the math there, and with the accepted goal of 460, I believe the 30% of that is 138.
Right. I think 138 is low. I think I have here 150 a quarter, like 150, 149, 150, 150. Am I off?
Yeah, that would be high.
That would be real high.
Oh, this is Tennessee.
That would be over the goal.
Northern Middle is often easy to confuse with Tennessee on that, as Marla would make it known. It'd be 35, 34, 34, 35. Does that sound good? On the
Yes.
All right.
138. We're good.
Okay, so last up we have youth work experience. I believe, Troy, you generally want to make a comment about the difference between phase 1 and phase 2.
Yes, and Northern Middle has been doing a great job in this. But I've
Mhm.
said it throughout our little meeting, so I'll repeat it for everyone here. Phase one, of course, was our governor's discretionary fund, so you had to be WIO eligible. Phase two, coming from the governor and the commissioner, is if a youth is between 14 and 24 and needs a part-time job, we should be able to help them. That's the stipulation. If they come into the AJC looking for a part-time job, we want to be able to help them with that work experience from go. There's been some talks, this is helping everybody from the youth from 14 to 24. It's just an open door policy for the state of Tennessee from the governor and the commissioner that if they're that age and they come in and they apply, we want to be able to help them. And that's the phase two portion.
That's great. And just, I think that this is another great example of additional source of funds going to where we need it, which is these core programs, right? And so I do have a couple data notes on this one. One is in the event that notice that while I have SYEP big and bold here, the actual KPI is youth work experience, right? So what that means is, should you use regular old Title I formula dollars to do youth work experience, that would count towards this KPI, first point. Second point is in the event that someone who walked through the door was eligible to be co-enrolled within Title I youth in particular, if that co-enrollment were to occur, they would count towards both KPIs. So I just wanted to be clear on the forefront on that one.
So one quick question around guidance for the SYEP program. We really made a concerted effort, and again, the contractors worked hard this summer to get as many folks enrolled as possible. We've got funding that we will have available to start planning in January for a strong summer program to begin again in the May timeframe, which I think will allow us to put together a more substantial, meatier package for the youth and develop more work sites. But you made a comment about any youth that comes into the AJC. Are you all really wanting this to go year round? We have been working in Wilson County to do something there with Mayor Hutto on fall breaks, Christmas break, spring break leading into next summer. But I don't know, without the funding for staffing on this, just to have a revolving door might be challenging. So give me some feedback on the timing of the program and where do you think it should be the most intense?
So
Nick?
yeah, we do want it year round, and it starts July 1st, of course, goes to August 31st. We're knowing those second and third quarters are going to be less than our first and fourth. But let's say 18 to 24-year-olds walk in, that type range. If, again, like you said, if somebody comes in for winter break, maybe a college shoot or something like that, and just needs that, I'm off 3 weeks, but I need to make money somehow. They may not be able to get their full experience there, but they can start on it. If there are youth that could do after school for a few hours here and there, that's also a possibility. But we know the big chunk's going to come in that fourth quarter when high school is letting out on the verge of when those parents can make their kids work and send them and make them go get part-time jobs. We're expecting that, but we don't want to cut anybody off that could possibly need it.
Can I perhaps ask a clarifying question of Nestor? Hey, Nestor, to maybe reframe Marla's question, how would you feel if Northern Middle were to perhaps hit their annual goal early?
Their goal is what? Well,
How would you feel if Northern Middle was able to hit their annual goal that they've agreed to before the beginning of next summer?
that would be great. then we would have to, I mean, we would have to actually, Troy, I'm gonna let you chime in because you're the program manager for this, and have we, um,
So let
so if
me,
you run out of money,
Well, I'm not saying that it's going that far, right? But I'm just like, that's the scenario, right? Like
right,
if to your point, Marla, if we have this as rather than a summer centric program to a year round, I think that, you know, the demand is higher than how much money that you've been given, right? So the question is, from a state's standpoint, is the intention summer, or is the intention that we are serving folks as they come in, right? So I think that's the
exactly. And my
Right.
point is that it was very expedited this summer.
Yes.
So I don't know that I want to continue full force into the second and third quarter. And then when we get to the fourth quarter, we don't have any money available. And so we're not being able to put a program together next summer because there's no funding. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. We want to serve as many youth as we
Mhm.
can now, but we also know that to implement a good summer program, you need to
Right.
start planning in January,
Yes.
February to get those sites
Yes.
worked up. And if we don't have money available and won't know if we've got money available until July, then we're back in the same boat that we were in this summer.
Right.
And that brings me to another question about, I know that you all have just recently procured new justice involved providers, and that you are in the process, I don't know if you've awarded yet, the SYEP funds for the nonprofits in the state. Will their results be included in these KPIs?
They will have
So,
their own, for the
yeah.
youth, they'll have, what they submit will be their KPIs that they have to hit.
Mhm. So, and then transitioning to just staying on youth for a second. Um, the conversations that I've been in with leadership, the emphasis is serve as many people as possible
Right.
to demonstrate that there is a need here in order to solidify perhaps a reoccurring funding source. So, Nestor, let me know if I'm overstepping here. Is I would think that we want to be very clear that that is the mission, and that if Northern Middle spends all their money, they hit all their targets early, I would say thank you for that. And then it's on the state to figure out how we get you, you know, end that sentence as you will, right?
Yeah,
So, yeah,
correct. If she hits just an honest answer would be that she would reapply for some funds. And then we can go, hey, listen, this is what's happening. This is what occurred. Won't be the only one. This is not the only exception we're going to have. We're going to have other areas that are going to meet their needs. They met their KPIs, they met their youth, and
Mhm.
now they're running out of funds. How do we allocate new funds to them? Where do we get it from?
Right.
Besides the, you know, and so remember, this is the first time we're all doing this together. So we are learning the structure of how to do this out of just national funds, but also state funds, because this other phase two is that, you know, a state fund. So we're trying to make sure, and Troy, if I'm forgetting something or anything, please let me know. But yeah, Marla, if you do, it is, you know, you can always apply for more, and we will do the state will do whatever it can to try to facilitate. Now, I can't promise you anything, of course,
Right.
that, but
Yeah.
the premise is that we start something to show the need for not just the national grants, but also the state funding to keep these programs going.
All right. So, and I appreciate that very much. I want to go back to the KPIs really quick for the youth work experience and the justice involved. I think if you are providing funding for justice involved training or youth work experience, then that to get an accurate picture of what's happening in Northern Middle, that those KPIs should be included as a subset within these bigger goals. Just like your adult education, you've got several providers in there in Northern Middle, but all of the KPIs are wrapping up to a larger goal. I think you should really consider adding your nonprofits for the youth work experience and your nonprofits that you're giving the justice involved training to for the public accountability and the knowing of what's happening in Northern Middle for a total picture. That makes sense. Maybe it doesn't.
Comments received, Nestor and Troy. We don't need to necessarily solve that on this call.
No, but I understand what you're saying. I
Mhm.
totally clearly understand where the differential of KPIs need to go.
Right.
I am not an expert on that. I always lean to Mr. Ben. And so I think,
And I'll just say from where I standpoint about just balls and strikes, we have the capacity to do that. It would be up to programs about whether or not that would align with what they're trying to do. Right. So we're happy to have that follow-up conversation separately on that one. And then I know we're past time, but you asked a great question of reentry. Luke, do you want to speak to, there's been some money swirling around and what might happen there? I believe the decision has not been made yet on.
I'm sorry,
That-
is that regarding our grant?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe so we have gone over the proposals, and I believe that we should be making announcements pretty soon for who was awarded.
And so
But
I guess,
William would know more. He's not on this call, but
so I guess to rephrase Marla's question there is, when we give out additional funds, perhaps to Northern Middle, and again, perhaps, would there be strings attached to that in terms of perhaps enrollments?
oh, I'm sorry. So the grant doesn't necessarily have any sort of requirement for enrolling in WIOA, but we do want to make sure that that's just a practice that is done. So technically the funds are not federal funds, so there's no obligation for WIOA enrollment. But go ahead.
And that's not where I'm going with that, because in the justice involved, we've got several different programs that are adding up to the total justice involved number. I'm just saying that if you want a true picture of what's happening in Northern Middle, you should be able to count all of those service levels that these other nonprofits are doing in these KPIs so that you get the big picture of how many youth are being enrolled in work experience by either the workforce board or the nonprofits, or how many justice involved are being enrolled by Wagner Pizer, by adult ed, or by the nonprofits. I think that they should be included as a totality. That's all I'll say on that. I'm just looking for
No, yeah, I
the
think
big picture.
I think the comment is well received, and I don't know if this new opportunity from the people, the great people of justice involved, whether or not there's a fancy name with that, but I would say it probably makes sense to include it like it was a different program, right? In terms of line items, in terms of give the state board receipts of sorts about this number of people came from this, right? And I'd be happy to align with that, assuming that, Luke, do you think that would make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
we, of course, we want to make sure we capture as many people as possible. Anybody receiving funds from our various grants,
Mhm.
they are required to produce data on those individuals. So we are going to get all of the enrollments from those. It's a little bit challenging to convince nonprofits to enroll people. So we're working through that, but I definitely agree. We're doing the best we can as far as getting as many enrollments as we can all totaled together.
And I think this conversation exactly aligns with this point here of funding dependent things. Like when we send out funds, they should be tracked. Everybody should be on the same page. The state board should be informed on a quarterly basis about where we are. So I think we're all singing the same song. I know we are way over time here. I just wanted to thank Northern Middle for their great feedback. I do have some bonus slides here at the very end. If I can get to the very end. In-school youth work experience. Okay, so bonus slides. Maps. Here is Madison's glorious map of AJCs. This is a map of potential serve and adult basic education providers. And we have IELTE providers. We have distress counties. Current year, we have the improvement or a decline between last year and this year for distress counties, as well as last year's distress county map. I also threw in the CSEP map of providers, and yes, this is just the ones that go through the state. Local contact information, and as I said earlier, I owe you state contact information by subject matter experts, as well as the CSEP contacts. And then finally, what is next? We owe you the KPI report for the closeout for program year 22. I also noted here that we also owe you a scorecard with not just Title I and Wagner Pizer. And then we also have the state board meeting coming up later this month.
So
The
Ben,
last, yeah.
will you please relook at our incumbent worker numbers before you run that June 30th KPI report and finalize it?
I will absolutely. And I know that another thing that is crazy wacky right now is RISA, right? Like the
Okay,
reports
yeah.
are wonky there. And then the other final point that I wanted to make, and then we have said this in other years, but this is increasingly a priority for us, is to get these things on a dashboard, right? So we don't have to be pulling them separately and training on how to pull them. It'd be great to just, for you and your leadership, to just see where you're at. And so Snap ENT is kind of the model of that we're going on, and that this link does work. It is by invitation only because there's PII on it. Hopefully we can make a clone of this stripping the PII from it. So that's kind of where we're at there. So with all that being said, thank you so much for your comments. The recording, the PowerPoint, the comments, a summary should be in your inbox by Monday. Consider these goals to be official. So
do I need to respond back anything at all to you? That are we good?
This call is to do all that. So thank you all again.
Thank you.
I think the owl, I think the ventriloquist. Thanks everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks
Bye.
everyone.